friends, welcome back to my channel. I'm Tori, and today I'm going to be re-ranking every fantasy and science fiction book I have ever given 5 stars. So I wanted to go back through my 5-star reads and just see if those 5 stars were still holding up. Some of these books I've read fairly recently, some it's been a really long time since I've read them, and I wanted to see kind of where everything stacks up. The top tier I have for this video is S tier, 10 stars. These are the books that I just absolutely love. They're masterpieces. I will reread and reread and reread them. Next up, we have a still love it. This is a category right underneath the S tier. These are books that I still love and hold a very special place in my heart, but they might not be quite at the same level as my S tier favorites of all time masterpieces. Midline, we have a solid 5. This is a book that I still really like, would still definitely give a 5 stars, but it's maybe not quite to the level of the masterpieces above it. Then the 4th tier is I was generous. These are for the books that I gave 5 stars that maybe I was not being as picky as I would be now, or I don't know if it's holding up to that 5-star value, etc. And then finally, we have 4-star tier at the very end. And those are books that I would actually remove from a 5-star review and put them back down. And we're gonna start with some Robin Hobb, and I actually should put these next to each other so I can do them right after the other. Assassin's Quest is the 3rd book in Robin Hobb's Realm of the Elderlings opening trilogy, the Farseer trilogy, and it is the longest of the 3 books, and I really liked Farseer. Farseer was a really good trilogy. I liked it more and more as I can remember as I went through the books, and I actually really liked Assassin's Quest a lot. I know that a lot of people are kind of polarized on their opinions of it, but I personally really liked it. And let's see, I think I am going to give that a solid 5. I think that's very much still a 5-star read for me. I liked it the best of the opening trilogy, and I think I would still give it a 5-star. I haven't read these for like 4 years or so maybe I'd change my mind on a reread, but I still really remember loving that book, and so I'm going to leave it at a solid 5. The next one is kind of a weird jump in chronological order. Fool's Assassin is the 1st book of the last trilogy of Realm of the Elderlings, the Fitz and the Fool trilogy, and I read this out of order. I know, I've already talked about it, no need to come after me in the comments. I didn't know what I was doing at that time. Luckily, I didn't finish the other 2 books, so I still haven't read the ending to the Fitz and the Fool trilogy, but Fool's Assassin I came back to, and despite the fact that there was a massive time jump because I skipped a bunch of books that I didn't realize in the middle, this book made me ugly cry. I don't know where to put this one. I think this one I'm going to put in the still love it category. I'm trying not to let my recency bias color any Robin Hobb right now because I just finished Ship of Magic, which is her first Live Ship Traders book, and that was not a great experience for me. See all of the videos I've recently done on it. So standing on its own, I think Fool's Assassin, yeah, I really, really loved coming back to those characters, and I had a really good time with it. Next up is Anthony Ryan's Blood Song. This is a recent read, and I loved this. A lot of people told me that I was going to absolutely love this book because it checks a lot of the boxes of tropes I really love and character types I really love, and they weren't wrong. So I think I'm going to drop it right here, actually. I still really, really love this book. I think it's a definite, it's going to stay as a 5-star read, and it's honestly one of my favorite books I've read in the last probably year and a half. So definitely deserves the 5-star read. I'm really curious to see how this all ends up, because my hope is that the 5 stars that I've given out are holding up, and I still feel that way about them. So we'll see as we get to the end what this looks like. Okay, we're gonna do Long Price Quartet. Now, I read all 4 of those last year. They're fairly short, and I highly recommend them to anyone who's looking for super character-focused epic fantasy. It is a bit of a slow burn, but man, is it worth the ride. Shadow and Summer is the 1st book, And I think in the 4 books of the quartet, it's probably my second favorite. I really, really liked that opener book. And it was because of that opening book that I knew I was going to absolutely love the quartet as a whole. Yeah, I think I'm going to give that one Still Love It. And I'm going to put it at the top because honestly, this is such a good series, you guys. And that's the thing. Any of these books, I love them. So even if they go back into a 4-star category, I absolutely love these books. So like there's no shade happening on any of these books. These are some of my favorites. Betrayal in Winter is my favorite of the 4 in Long Price Quartet. And that one's got to go in S tier. It really does. Like that book I absolutely loved. And I'm honestly kind of... Shadow and Summer should probably be up there too, to be honest. Yeah, I think I'm going to put it up there. These 2 books are incredible. I absolutely love them so, so, so much. Autumn War is book 3 in that quartet, and it's... This one I think is my least favorite of the 4. Yes, I'd say that. It's my least favorite of the 4, and it is still incredible, so I'm going to put it at the top of my solid 5. I really enjoyed it, but what I loved so much about this series was the everyday life slow burn character kind of slower pace of the story, and Autumn War was, huge spoiler I'm sure, about a war, and I just didn't love, because I'm a big military fantasy buff, and this particular book, it was fine, it was still incredible. This whole quartet, all 4 books are incredible, but that one specifically didn't hit me as hard as the other 3 did. The Price of Spring is the final book in the Long Price Quartet, and it was my 3rd favorite out of the 4. This one's gonna go in the Still Love It category. This whole quartet was just absolutely masterful, and it's actually really hard for me to rank them. I know that Betrayal in Winter and Shadow in Summer are my top 2, and I'm 95% sure Betrayal is my favorite, so we're just gonna go with this for now. Next up is Before They Are Hanged by Joe Abercrombie. This is the 2nd book in his very well-beloved First Law trilogy. The trilogy as a whole was a huge disappointment for me, especially the final book, Last Argument of Kings. I really didn't like it. But I really, really liked book 2. I gave book 2 5 stars because there's a character arc from book 1 to book 2 that I absolutely loved. It was one of my favorite fantasy character arcs I think I've ever read. Really, really loved that. Yeah, I think we're going to go with a solid 5. I'm going to drop it right in the middle of the solid 5s because I would still give it 5 stars despite my opinions about the final book. I think book 2 is hands down the best in that trilogy and the one that I personally loved the most. Now we're going to go into my favorite series of all time, and that is the Red Rising Saga, and we're going to start with book 2, which is Golden Sun. Now, I do have, I think, a 4-star rating on the first book. Honestly, for personal enjoyment, I'd give that a 5, but objectively, I do think it's a 4.5 stars, so I'm just going to leave that off for now. Golden Sun is definitely at the top of my Still Love It category, and Morning Star is going to go right up in my S tier 10 stars. It is my favorite series end I've ever read. And I'm, again, just talking about the original trilogy. I know there's books after it, but Morning Star is a very, very special book to me. I absolutely love it. And there's only one book on this list that's going to go above it. So we'll just leave that for now. But absolutely love it. S tier 10 stars. Red Rising all day, every day. All right, Down Below Beyond is a science fiction kind of YA book by my friend Tom Bruno, who's an indie author, and I loved this book. This was a palate cleanser book that really came at the right time for me, and I just loved the found family themes that were played with in it. I think that the sci-fi elements are really unique and interesting, and nobody writes alien species the way Tom Bruno does. I think he's brilliant at it, and I loved it. Where did I put this? I think that's still a solid 5 for me. That's a book that I would easily pick back up, reread again. It's a really, really good, heartwarming. There's some really good, cozy, heartwarming moments in it with the characters, and the friendship themes just make me super happy. So I'm going to put that in the solid 5, I think. All right, Spider Key, which is book 2. Oops, where's my book 1? Let's start with Wickwire Watch. Wickwire Watch is a self-published fantasy blog off finalist from this last year, and it is the first book in the Riverfall Chronicles by Jacqueline Hagan. This is one of my favorite indie series that I've read so far. I absolutely love it. It's very gaslamp Victorian epic fantasy, which is something that I hadn't really read before and really liked. Let's see. This one I think I would put in a solid 5 still. It's still a 5-star read for me. I love the main character. He's very, very similar to Artful Dodger from Oliver Twist, who's one of my favorite fictional characters of all time. And I love the magic system and the world building, and the idea of like gaslamp epic really makes me excited because it's something that I haven't read a lot of. So I'm going to leave that in solid 5. Excuse me. Spider Key I'm also going to put in solid 5, and I'm actually going to put it above Wickwire Watch because it's actually my favorite of the 3 books that are out so far. The tension just ramps up so much, and I think the pacing in Spider Key is better than the first one. So yeah, those 2 definitely stay in 5-star. Moving on to David Gemmell's Legend. This is a older fantasy novel, and I'm trying to remember, I think it was written in the 80s. And there's a couple tropes in it that I didn't love, but overall this is such a fantastic kind of veteran warrior protagonist military fantasy, and I really, really liked it. I think the character work in it is really good. Where on earth would I put this? Once I get them in the categories, then I don't know where to rank them. This doesn't feel right. I don't know where to put it. I'm going to put it there. I'm going to split up the Riverfall Chronicles. Yeah, I think that feels right. So that one's still a solid 5-star for me. That is definitely a book that I would reread, and I would recommend to people who are looking for older fantasy, like pre-2000s fantasy, to check out. It's a standalone, but there is a series that it is a part of that you can go on and read. All right, next one is one that probably most of you haven't heard of, and that is A Green and Ancient Light by Frederick S. Durbin. This is, I haven't read Piranesi yet, but I'm assuming that for the people that enjoyed Piranesi, based on what I've heard of it, you might also like this one. It's a very ethereal fantasy. It's a low fantasy, takes place in our world, and it kind of has some Neil Gaiman-esque vibes. Like if you merged Piranesi, like Susanna Clarke, with a Neil Gaiman, you'd have something kind of close to this, which is very outside of what I normally love. I'm sorry, my nose is itching. I don't know if I got a piece of cat hair or something. It's driving me nuts, so excuse me. Anyways, so yeah, I think it's something outside of what I typically like, but I really enjoyed it. I do think... I don't know. I think that was a generous 5-star. I do. I would still give it a 5-star, but I do think that part of that was just honestly points for the uniqueness of it, which I still stand by. But I would definitely, I don't know. Would I read it again? I don't know. Maybe. Maybe not. Maybe that's why I'm putting in the I was generous area. All right, let's go to The Martian by Andy Weir. This book, I loved this book so much. I wanted to get into some more science fiction and sci fantasy last year, and I read this for a readathon and absolutely loved it. I love the protagonist. The humor is so funny and good, and the tension is so good. It's just, it's such a good book. I really liked it. I would put that in the love it category. Yeah, probably here-ish. I really love that book, and I honestly would definitely reread that, so I'm going to throw it up in the still love it. Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson, book 1 in the Stormlight Archive. This is one of those books where I've read so much since this book, and I have had a rougher experience with the last book in the Stormlight Archive. I'm not going to talk about it. My relationship to Sanderson as an author now is definitely a lot different than it was when I read it for the first time, simply because I've read so much since then that I've learned what I like more, if that makes any sense. So I think, but I really, really loved Way of Kings. I thought it was a really solid book. I think it's a bit long. I think I'm going to put it in solid 5, because I think I would still give it 5 on a reread, maybe, I think. Next up is Skyward by Brandon Sanderson. This is his YA science fiction novel. This was one that I really, really loved when I read it, and reading the subsequent books, I feel like Sanderson really went off the rails with this series, to be honest. I've only read the second one and part of the third. I DNF'd the third one, Cytonic, because I have no idea what was happening, where that was going. I was not a fan. I think I'm going to put that one in. I was generous. I do think it's a very good book, and I would highly recommend it for anybody who's getting into science fiction. I think that they would really enjoy it. Love the protagonist. And I think Skyward in and of itself is a really, really good book. I just think the rest of the series kind of went off the rails. After that, we're going to grab Words of Radiance by Brandon Sanderson, which is book 2 in the Stormlight Archive. This, when I read the series, was my favorite of the 4 that are out. I don't know now. It probably still would be. I think so. But it would definitely be between it and Way of Kings for my favorite. I think we're going to put it up at the top of solid 5, because I honestly, remember just really being emotionally impacted by a lot of the scenes in that book. I loved them. So we're going to leave it up there, I think, for now. Ender's Shadow by Orson Scott Card. This is one of my favorite early science fiction fantasy reads. I love this book so much. I've read Ender's Game and enjoyed that as well, but honestly, Ender's Shadow I like better because I like Bean as a character better. And if you haven't read it, it's basically the same story as it is in Ender's Game, but from Bean's perspective and his upbringing and how he got to the school. And I love him. I love him so much. So, I haven't read that in so long, you guys. I think I'm going to leave it in a solid 5. I would be interested to see if that would go up again if I reread it. I don't know. But I would still give it probably a 5-star based on what I remember. You know what? I think I'm going to leave Skyward there. I'm going to move Green and Ancient Light. I think Green and Ancient Light is a really solid 4-star read. Anyways, moving on. Emperor's Soul, also by Brandon Sanderson. This is a super, super short novella that he wrote that I actually think is incredibly underrated and is probably my second favorite, question mark. I don't know if I don't know. Here? No. Here. Here? Here. Sure, we'll just go with that. We're going to put it in the solid 5 stars. I do legitimately think it is one of Sanderson's best works of fiction. This feels really messy in solid 5. I don't know how I feel about this ranking, so, take it with a grain of salt. It might change tomorrow. But Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. This is a book that very heavily impacted me when I read it in college and is a foundational book for me as a writer. This one I put in still love it, for sure. Well, I think I would put it above Martian. Yeah, I think it's an incredible book, and I think that Mary Shelley was so far ahead of her time when she wrote it, and that she was brilliant for her age writing that book. It still blows my mind. So we're going to do that. Jade City by Fonda Lee. I loved this book. I thought it was really good. I really like this trilogy as a whole. I couldn't get enough of it, and it wasn't until the end of Jade Legacy that I think I realized how much this series had emotionally impacted me, and the more that I sit on it and the more that I think about it, the more I love these characters and the more that I would like to go back and reread it. So I think we're gonna go with a still love it. All right, let's get into some Steven Erikson, shall we? Gardens of the Moon is book 1 of the Malazan Book of the Fallen, of which I've read 4 books, and I've given all 4 of them 5 stars. Gardens of the Moon was a 4-star for me upon the first read 10 years ago, and I gave it 5 stars when I reread it last year. I do think that I appreciated it more on a reread, but I don't necessarily think that it's because it was a reread. I think part of that was because I've read so much more epic fantasy at this point that it just wasn't as confusing. The world wasn't as hard for me to get into, and I have forgotten so much about this book in 10 years that honestly it was kind of like rereading it for the first time. I do think, though, I completely understand why people have a hard time getting into the series with this book, because it's very good and I love it, but it's also a big ask for a first book in a series. I do think that it's kind of more of a primer to, like Steven Erikson himself said, it's more of a primer to the series than anything else, and I agree with that. I'm gonna give that an I was generous, because yeah, it's don't get me wrong, like the quality of this book is incredible. Erikson is hands down one of my top 2 favorite authors of all time in terms of fantasy, so I love it, but I do think that it can be a bit of a hard book for people to get into the series with. Now, Dead House Gates, on the other hand, which is book 2, is my favorite fantasy series book of all time, fantasy or sci-fi, and I'm going to put that at the very top of S tier, 100 stars, 10 stars, 150 stars, because it's amazing. I love this book so much. I think it's brilliant, and it was like the perfect timing when I read it the first time. I really needed this book when it showed up in my life, and it's become a very foundational piece of fiction for me as a writer. So we're gonna just give it all the accolades because it deserves it. Memories of Ice. This is book 3 in the Malazan Book of the Fallen. Also really excellent and a lot of people's favorite book in the series. To be honest, of the 4 books that I've read, I remember my experience with this one the least. I remember the ending very solidly, but I don't remember a ton of the rest of it. So I'm gonna put it up at the top of solid 5, I think, because honestly I don't remember enough of it except for the very end of the book. I remember Dead House Gates and House of Chains so much more than that middle one, other than the ending. So I'm really looking forward to rereading that and seeing if that would change where I would put that in the list at all. House of Chains, book 4. This one, man, like some of the arcs that come through from earlier books in this one are just absolutely mind-blowingly good. However, the opening of House of Chains is probably the hardest bit of fantasy I've ever read. It is very heavy, and I highly recommend that people be in a really good headspace before they try to tackle the opening of House of Chains. It's a lot. It's a lot to read all at once, and there's a character that takes center stage that is really, really not fun to be around, even on a page. So, but I gotta say I still love it. I really do. Like, where am I going to put this? Let's put it there. The arcs of specific characters through earlier books to book 4 just wreck me still. And it's been 10 years since I've read them. So, Neverwhere by Neil Gaiman. This is my favorite Neil Gaiman novel, since it's the only one here of his that I've given 5 stars so far. I've read Stardust and Ocean at the End of the Lane, and I tried American Gods and DNF'd it. I really like Neverwhere. It is definitely, I think Gaiman is just like the champion of low fantasy and magical realism in a lot of ways, and I think he's brilliant. Good, so I think I'm gonna throw it here. Yeah. You know what? Way of Kings, I'm gonna put Way of Kings up here. I think I enjoyed Way of Kings more than I'm giving it credit for, so we're going to throw it up a little bit higher. We Are the Dead by Mike Shackle. This is book 1 of his Last War trilogy. This single book is like my standard for grimdark now. It's brilliant. It is such a great merge of military fantasy and grimdark and oftentimes in grimdark there's such a aspect of nihilism in so much grimdark that it's hard for me to want to read it, because I need some kind of perseverance or point or purpose or something. And this to me was a great example of doing a grimdark story that still has the struggle of characters trying to make something better or do something about their situation. I really, really loved it. I think we're gonna put that one. What am I doing with Memories of Ice down here? We're gonna put that up to Still Love It. Memories of Ice is really good. I cannot put a Malazan book. I can't do it. I can't do that. So anyways, We Are the Dead. Yeah, Still Love It. I think we're gonna put it up there. Next up, Lies of Loch Lamora. This is one of my favorite fantasy books of all time, and in my opinion, Scott Lynch does not get the credit he deserves for his dialogue, his world building, his character work. I think he's brilliant. I love this book so much. And I think we're gonna put it right up there in the middle of S tier, because honestly, I love that book. I still think about it, and it's been a long time since I've read it, and I still consider it one of my all-time favorites, and I would reread. I'm hoping to reread it soon, actually. Book 2 in that series is Red Seas Under Red Skies, which honestly gets a bad rap way too often, in my opinion. I hate that that happens, because it is so good. It's so good, you guys. Pirates, okay? And I recognize that if some people don't like nautical fantasy, for whatever reason, there's a lot of nautical fantasy in here, but it's brilliantly written, and the pirate captain is S tier wonderful. So I don't know why this book gets a bad rap, and I'm going to put it... I think I'm going to put it up here and Still Love It, right behind Malazan, because I think it gets a bad rap, and I really love it a lot. So, last but not least, we have 2 books from my favorite indie series of all time as of this point. And that is The Mortal Techniques by Rob J. Hayes. And it is a Japanese-inspired or Eastern-inspired samurai and yokai, vengeful spirits, and really cool magic. If you grew up in like the shonen anime era, it's like candy for adults. It's amazing. I love it so much. Never Die is the first book in this series of standalones, and they all stand apart from each other, but there are through lines for people that have read them all. There are some Easter eggs, which I really loved. Never Die. Oh man, this book is so good, you guys. Where would I put it? I think I'm gonna put it up in the Still Love It, right up there. Because it has some flaws, but honestly I don't care. I love it so much. And it's such a banger opener. It's so good. And I love it even more now, having read the other 2 books out in the series. And one of those is Spirits of Vengeance, book 3. I love this book. I love this book so much. I love it so much. I'm going to put that up here and Still Love It up towards the top, I think. Because that was the book in the series that really told me that I loved this series way more than I gave it credit for at the very beginning. It's so good, and that book specifically, book 3, just blew my mind, and I love it, and I cannot wait to reread it. I love that series, and I heard through the grapevine that Rob Hayes is planning on writing another one, or is in the process of writing another one, and I can't wait. So, anyways, that is all of the books, all of the fantasy and science fiction books that I have ever given 5 stars. I do feel like I'm a little stingy with 5 stars, I'm not gonna lie. I give a lot of 4 stars. I give a lot of 4 stars out. But what I'm happy to say about this list is, if I look at this, there's only... because I would still give Gardens of the Moon 5 stars on a reread. So there's really only 2 books that I feel like I would maybe bump down or admit that I was pretty generous in. The rest of them, pretty solid, which makes me happy, because that tells me that that the books that I'm giving 5 stars are really staying with me, no matter how long it's been since I read them. But yeah, I would love to know down in the comments below, let me know if any of these re-ranks surprised you, and what books that you've given, are there any books that you've given 5 stars that you might look back on and say, well, I was being a little generous, or books that you wish you would have given 5 stars that have like endeared themselves to you over time after you read them. Let me know down in the comments. I hope that you all have a fantastic week. I hope you are all reading 5-star reads, and I will see you in the next video.